People are losing friends, loved ones, either by death or falling out, losing jobs, homes, on a very regular occurrence now in all of your lives. And it brings great pain, sadness, and it can send you spinning out of balance if careful self-observance is not adhered to. Back in May of 2015, while still on Cosmic Voice, I started giving out some future warnings for listeners to absorb, and it was a chance for the listeners to get ahead of the game. But like most predictions, people tend to ignore them until a much later date. A case of leave everything that is essential until the last minute. But some took it on board. There were several predictions that year. As I warned, shadow and inner work was essential in the coming period of time. You had to get the self ready for what was to come. That is not a selfish act, as it actually helps others in your circle whilst you're doing it. And given we had the much later warning of we are processing and dealing with several previous generations of our ancestors at the same time, the value of that work cannot be garnered by or priced by money. It's cathartic work, the great purging of the self of all the traumas, shame, guilt, tragedies, abuse of this and previous lifetimes. I think at this point our regular listeners will realise that prediction was not only correct, but an essential to embrace. I went on to state these next few years would get ugly as this process was underway. People may ask why it would get ugly, and the reason is people hold on to the negative frequencies far longer than their positive frequencies or experiences. People passing judgments to and fro where none are or were required. People talking in riddles and doublespeak. Reactionary snap judgment comments and statements will all come to the fore. Reactions out of context and not conducive to the interaction are all signs of inner turmoil, and a clear sign of those who have far more work to do than they perceive to be the case. Later that year, I hinted on the two worlds pushed as a theory to get people to think. Whilst being aware myself it was not a theory at all, and it was an event of sorts about to unfold on a larger scale. A separation of sorts, whilst also being a merging of the two worlds for people to see. This puzzled many at the beginning, but then it began to unfold and people began to see it on many levels. It was not just a sight event, it was a frequency-based event, and in essence another purging of sorts. Like the shadow and inner work, it began to sort out those who wanted to progress in and of themselves, and the ones content to let things slide. It followed quickly with our piece, The Masks of Illusion. Each and every one of us has worn with cunning and vehement protection. The masks present a fake version of ourselves, as we judge ourselves far too harshly and think others do it to us also. From overview, it looks a ridiculous concept. Why are we all judging each other, in most cases harshly, competing with each other on almost every conceivable piece of matter, whereby what ensues then is we all wear thicker and thicker masks to cover up our perceived weaknesses or lack thereof. Insecurity in and of your own vessel is a most damaging aspect of humanity that leads to inferiority complex, Stockholm syndrome, limitation programs, unbalanced ego, dissociative identity disorder, which used to be known as multiple personality disorder, which largely got people sent to mental institutions in the past. And yet, aren't the masks we wear playing the role of a split personality? What the majority of people were presenting themselves as is and was fake, largely enhanced by the ultimate in fakery, the so-called famous people off the movies, screens, music and sports stadiums. None of those people operate in reality land. They were created and crafted into a program of no escape. Well, there was an escape, but it never ended well for them. People acted like they were rich. Yes, they were rich via the credit card debt system, which essentially created the modern day middle class. That was an illusion. You were middle class by debt only in most cases. People exhibited bravado and external strengths via the now well-memed six-pack, and yet were as weak as piss internally, frightened of their own shadows, traumas, and lack of internal fortitude, and all too content to put on a front to the public, yet destroying themselves internally. We lie to ourselves in this mode consistently. Does anyone stop to think of the sheer stupidity of doing that? There's enough lies externally without adding it internally. But most of the lies are due to covering up shortfalls within ourselves. The masks worn tightly on all people. But you were warned they would be falling away 3 to 4 years ago. They did, and they have. The consequences of that is ugly. Watching so many people change character, and also realizing few, or too few, were as nice as they portrayed themselves to be. And this is why I warned it would get ugly. It is, and it has. Many people who won't face their own shadows are now being forced into doing so. All had the opportunity to get ahead of that in THI, and many did, and many did not. They are now having their own issues displayed publicly for all to see. The shadow aspects of the self have to be integrated to become you, but you have to process it, or it will repeat in this current time space. There's no hiding anymore, despite people's ridiculous attempts to convince themselves otherwise. Out will come envy, bitterness, anger, selfish, greedy, and the comparative mindset will go into overdrive as they flail about trying to justify and lessen their own actions. Their lies will be replaced by other lies in their vain attempt to keep their own illusions going. it won't work. And it will become a source of mild amusement and also frustration to those who have done their work. Spiritual-based envy will rise exponentially as the ones who did their work shine and stand out like beacons. Accusations of being smug will increase against you. Those doing that just dropped the S and became the mug, which was created by the self, as you and only you failed to listen to or heed the several warnings given to you. And you also missed the call that echoed all across the universe. Those that have done their work will have to work hard to protect that work and themselves. You will and have been tested severely in this coming phase. Do not feel guilty for others not waking up. Do not feel guilty for those that haven't done their shadow and inner work. They had just the same opportunity as you. You took it. They never. The world is now entering an increased phase where stupidity and rage will be even more prevalent. Hold your ground. Do not let those people throw you off track. The Wait Club, which is a spell cast, have waited too long for others to do things for them. Like I said back in November 2017, it's too late for them to catch up. Many didn't like that statement, and neither did I. The speed at which events are now taking place, and since then, few can argue with it now. No matter how sad it is, they had the same opportunity as you, they chose to ignore it. And unlike several other things in this world where we are denied certain things or access to, this was accessible by everyone. There is and there was zero excuses to be had in that undertaking. The gist is soul progression is never achieved by ignoring issues. Ignoring leads to standing still at best, and on a linear timeline, that means going backwards. The insanity of doing that because you cannot face the self looks even more bizarre from an overview point of view. So why did so many fall by the wayside? Lives drifting away. Because humanity has become lazy. More in terms of mindset than physical, although that is diminishing by the day with people having a penchant for technology, which ultimately leads to technology replacing them. Many won't believe that statement. Fine. But I promise you it will not change the inevitable as so many sleepwalk into transhumanism. Until it happens and then people complain. Who allowed this, they will cry. You did, is my answer. Lazy minds are not conducive to soul development. Lazy people who insist everyone else must do things to improve their lives also is not conducive. The same applies to shadow and inner work. Only you can do it, as only you knows what your shadows and traumas are. My other prediction back in 2015-16 and the 2020 vision is now on the horizon. People will see more. And no, I don't mean we'll all have better eyesight. Seeing is not always done with eyes. The world around us is collapsing on all levels at a record pace now, and you have two choices. Fear it and panic, or embrace it and prepare yourselves. The old world is leaving. It's not coming back. This next decade will see it collapse completely, and a new one can be born. And that new world is all down to you. If you have to ask, what can I do? You are clearly not ready for the next phase. And I will repeat again so it sinks in. That new world is all down to you.